Guys, this is M. Shanae for Hi-Fi in the Low Light. Welcome to part 2 of the Nhoord Hugo 2 review. Tonight we're going to be talking about the sound quality, starting with the sound signature, how the sound signature changes based on your digital input, headphone pairings with the internal amp, headphone pairings with the line out, and then comparisons to both my NFB 10 ES2 from AudioGD, as well as my Hi-Fiman HM901, which is being fed into my head amp PicoPower. To start with, guys, let's talk about the sound quality for the Hugo 2. What I like about the Hugo 2 is the sound is natural. The sound has a natural presentation. It doesn't exaggerate like the Sabre DACs that I'm used to. There is a from-the-body timbre that's new to me. You know, the sound of the chest or from out of the body, especially apparent in vocals. There is excellent micro detail that doesn't emphasize the macro detail. So less ambient noise, more transients, more resolve of timbre unique to the instrument. What's also nice is there's a smooth sense of dynamics. Microdynamics are excellent, macrodynamics are good. Again, there's a balance to the transients. There's not any emphasis on the attack or the decay. It's all resolved more clearly. Additionally, the internal amp has just a little bit of bloom to the mid-range that I appreciate, and the presentation of the Hugo 2 as a whole is very intimate. I like that. What changes when you switch the digital inputs? Let's start with optical. For optical, I used my iRiver H140 along with the cable that came with Hugo 2. The optical was noisy. It did not sound very good. Everything was kind of compressed. Everything was too strident. It was not a good quality. Moving up to USB. USB is where the Hugo 2 impressed me. I used my LG V20 along with a Type-C cable into the Nhoord Hugo 2. With USB mobile, the sound opened up. It was much better than optical. There was more dynamics. There was a blacker background, so better resolve. As a whole, everything improved. Now, let's take it a step even further. When I plugged it into my desktop using ASIO, it was better still. So USB from the desktop through FooBar, through ASIO, I got an even blacker background, right, which gave me a bigger, more precise image, especially coming from optical, and a bigger, more precise image than USB mobile. Additionally, there was even less emphasis up top. So there was less emphasis on the macro detail and more focus on the micro detail. To start off the internal amp pairings, we're going to take a look at the LCD XC. To start with, this is not my headphone. I've had it on loan for about 2 weeks now. The cable is not stock. It is a Y-Wires Red. The gentleman that I got it from said that the Y-Wire Red cable made noticeable improvements and changes to the overall balance of the sound. So that being said, my impressions are with an upgraded cable. I did not have a stock one on hand. What I liked about this pairing was the Hugo 2 has a naturalness, it has a warmth, it has a little bit of mid-bloom. That paired really well with what I felt was a very aggressive sound from the LCD XC, a sound that was a bit thinner in the low mids and a little overemphasized up top. What the Hugo 2 did is that a little bit of mid-bloom, that warmth, that body, kind of helped to smooth out some of the shoutiness and some of the roughness that was in the upper mid-range. Overall, I enjoyed the pairing. I felt the Hugo 2 had more than enough power. Changing the volume, I never had to go too much higher than purple. Even purple was too much. The pairing, for me, it was enjoyable. I like the body, the power in the lows that the LCD XC and Nhoord Hugo 2 had, as well as the overall balance. Now again, these are not a headphone that I've lived with, and this is a product that I've had for 2 weeks alongside the Nhoord Hugo 2, but I enjoyed it. I felt that it was advantageous. I felt that the LCD XC's weaknesses were masked and somewhat complemented by the Hugo 2's strengths. Let's move on to the Hugo 2 internal amp pairing with the Hi-Fiman HE4. Now my HE4 is not stock. I have mango wood cups, I have biodynamic DT880 pads that have angled over time, and I have an OFC copper cable from ZMF headphones. To understand the pairing, you need to understand my HE4. My HE4 has been modded to be a little bit slower and have a little bit more decay. Even with those mods, it is super high definition, over definition, super exciting, super exaggerated. Everything pops. It is just energy, excitement, loud, quiet, super dynamic. Very unrealistic, but I've enjoyed it over the years. What the Hugo 2 did is the Hugo 2 slowed it down a lot. The Hugo 2 slowed it down. It also improved the overall frequency, adding some body to the mid-range and smoothing a very rough top end. The problem with the Hugo 2 is it did not have enough power. I kept going up and up and up and up, trying to get to a reference 85 decibels, and I was not able to do that. As I got closer to 85, went up to 86, the entire sound started to distort, the bass just fell apart, the sound just became cacophonous. I wound up settling right at the white range at about 82 decibel peaks, an average of maybe 79, 78. At that average but acceptable level, what I found was the HE4 paired nicely with the Hugo for frequency. It had a more natural sound, a more natural timbre. The lack of power yielded a softer sound. It was not as exciting. It stripped it of all of its unique characteristics, but there was more micro detail. The blacker background of the Hugo 2 helped the HE4 resolve some things that were not as apparent before. Overall, good improvements to frequency, shortcomings for time domain. It made a very unique headphone, very run-of-the-mill and unsatisfactory for me. And a lot of that was because it didn't have the power to drive it, to maintain its edge and its excitement. Just didn't have the power. But the frequency changes of the DAC amp were beneficial. Next up is my Nhoord Red version 1. This is very much a do-it-yourself Grado RS1i. What I liked about this pairing was this is not a headphone that I go to for resolve or super detail. This is a more relaxed, exciting listening that's focused on the music, focused on the timbre. These two had a great tonality, had a great timbre. There was sufficient micro detail, there was sufficient macro detail. I didn't feel anything was lacking there, but I loved just how engaged, how involved I got into my music. This is a very colored sound and one that I find a lot of pleasure in. This is my guilty pleasure. These two were beautiful together. The Hugo 2 has a mid-range bloom that stacks nicely with the mid-focus of this headphone. In addition, there is good bass response. This particular headphone does extend lower than the traditional Grado. So again, just the whole experience was very balanced, very mid-focused, good clarity all around. The Nhoord Red V1 is a little hot up top. The Hugo 2 did alleviate some of that hotness, did smooth out that top end a little bit, and just gave me a nice pairing. There was not an excessive hardness. The bass was not excessively boomy. The pairing overall was very natural, very enjoyable. Just a good guilty pleasure listen. Guys, that's going to wrap up my impressions for the internal amp. We covered 3 headphones: the easy-to-drive planar, the LCD-XC, which is to close back, the very inefficient, hard-to-drive planar, my Hi-Fiman HE4, and we're wrapping up with the easy to moderately easy-to-drive dynamic Nhoord Red V1. Next, we're going to be moving to the external line-out pairings. We're going to start the line-out pairings with the ZMF Eikon and the Project Ember 2 from Garage 1217. This was an excellent combination. The reason we used the line-out of the Hugo 2 with the benefit was to get more power or an improved dampening factor. My Project Ember 2 has an adjustable output resistance. The medium setting gets me 35 ohms output. That gave me a better dampening factor with the ZMF Eikon. So what I loved about the Hugo 2 paired with these two is they share a similar sound signature. There's a black background on the Hugo 2. There's an even blacker background for the ZMF Eikon. There's a focus on the music first, on the micro details first, for both the Hugo 2 and the Eikon. This resulted in a very natural, very organic, very beautiful listening experience. There was a lot of resolve for the micro detail. Macro detail didn't pop out. Ambient noise did not pop out at me as much as I'm used to, and I enjoyed it. I appreciated being to really focus on the music and really dig deep into the selection of music that I was listening to. Again, the line out proved to be very black, very low noise, a wonderful listening experience. Moving on, I've got the Hugo 2 fed into the PicoPower, amplifying my Hi-Fiman HE4. Again, what I have is the same energy, the same excitement as my NFB10 ES2, but in a more portable package. The PicoPower provides the power, provides the energy, provides the excitement that the HE4 needs to bring back that unique characteristic. And when you combine that with the Hugo 2, I get the same improvements in timbre, I get the focus on micro detail, I get all of the beautiful warmth, the beautiful body, the natural sound, with enough power from the amp to keep things exciting, to keep the HE4's unique characteristics. Again, the line out on that Hugo 2 feeds incredibly well to another amplifier, giving me the power that I need to drive even a very inefficient planner like the HE4 without losing any of its excitement, without losing any of the quality of the Hugo 2 that I appreciate. Again, an excellent pairing with these two. Guys, let's wrap up with some comparisons. We're going to start with the Hugo 2 to the Hi-Fiman HM901, line out into the head amp PicoPower. In terms of price, the Hugo 2 comes in around $2,000. The 901 PicoPower cost me $1,500. I bought them new for retail. The two were more similar than I thought in terms of sound quality. Obviously, the Hugo 2 is transportable. It'll hook up into a variety of interfaces and let you play music from them. The 901 has a graphic interface built on top of the DAC, as well as a storage solution. So they meet a different set of needs. You know, one is not going to be better than the other. It's going to depend on what you want. In terms of sound quality, I use the vintage filter on my 901, which gives me a good mix of both excitement and natural warmth. Again, I was surprised at the micro resolve, at the warmth from the 901, especially compared to the Hugo 2. Now, where they differ is, as a whole, the Hugo 2 has a blacker background, it has a smoother sound, it has more of a focus on the micro detail, more of a focus on the timbre of the music. It's more natural. The 901 has a good bit of warmth, it's balanced, but it is more exciting. It does have a slight bit of overemphasis that is associated with Sabre DACs. Headphone pairings, we'll start. I like the LCD XE with the Hugo 2 more. I like the HE4 with the 901 PicoPower, and I like the Nhoord Red V1 with the Hugo 2. The LCD XE is a complement to the Hugo 2, I think. This is exciting. There's a great sense of presentation in the lows. It's aggressive. This is smoother. This is blacker. The two pair really well together. The LCD XE with the 901, there's the same sense of power in the lows. That low planar bass presentation is the same from the 901 and the Hugo 2 with the LCD XE. But the more exciting sound of the 901 does not complement the XE. The smoother, more blacker, more micro detail focused, organic sound of the Hugo 2 better suits and better complements the LCD XE. Moving to the HE4, it's going to be a matter of preference for you guys. The Hugo 2 again had the better timbre, had the better micro detail, had, it softened the sound, it cut some of the emphasis on the macro and more of the micro into. You could really pair the Hugo 2 and the PicoPower and get the most out of the HE4, but that's $2,500. Right? That extra $1,000 is probably going to get me a better deal overall. So I'm not going to compare the $2,500 pairing of the Hugo 2 and PicoPower with the HE4 to the $1,500 pairing of the 901 to the PicoPower. Because again, if you've got $2,500 to spend, I think there are better options than both of these, or at least I would hope that there are. But again, Hugo 2 internal amp versus the PicoPower and the 901 stacked together. The 901 had a better sense of rhythm, it had a better sense of time, better sense of pace. You know, it was very much snap your fingers to the music, very lively, very exciting, with good timbre, good micro resolve, a very wide, spacious sound. I like the excitement, the sense of you guys can hear my poor attempts at snapping my fingers. Still figuring that out, but the sense of time, sense of rhythm, the sense of energy, the driving force of the music was better with the 901 and the PicoPower. You know, you could bob your head, snap your fingers, you could really kind of feel the groove of the music. Moving to the Hugo 2, it made the HE4 more relaxed. It wasn't as exciting. You know, the Hugo 2, while it balances the HE4, it robs it of its soul. The 901 with the vintage filter and the PicoPower keeps the energy, keeps the excitement, brings a little more of the micro detail out of the HE4 than I was expecting, adds a little bit of warmth into the decay that is necessary. This is the better combo for the HE4. Now the Nhoord Red V1, my guilty pleasure, I don't like it with the 901. I don't know what the problem is, I don't know why, but it just isn't enjoyable. Maybe there's too strong of a sense of rhythm and time. Whatever it is, it's too much. The 901's more energetic, exciting sound is not as enjoyable and pleasurable as the Hugo 2. So for, you know, the Nhoord V1, that relaxing, beautiful, colored, suck you in Grado sound, I like the Hugo 2. They're a better pair. The exciting, the maybe more, you know, balanced, energetic sound of the PicoPower and 901 just don't pair well with the Nhoord V1 in my opinion. Next, guys, we're going to be taking a look at how the LCD XE and Nhoord V1 compare to the Hugo 2 and how they sound out of the LH Labs Geek Out V2 Plus. Guys, next let's take a look at the LH Labs Geek Out V2 Plus and how it compares against the Chord Hugo 2. For these listening impressions, I used USB input with both. I used USB input from a mobile device as well as from my laptop. Running from my laptop, I did use foobar with ASIO out to both units. The filters, I used the white filter with the Chord Hugo 2. I used the green filter with the LH Labs Geek Out V2 Plus. What I like about that green filter is it does combat some of the emphasis of the Sabre DAC, but it does not completely negate it. There is still that sense of exaggeration present with the Geek Out V2. You know, in particular, both of these headphones have some emphasis. The LCD XC has some shout in the upper mid-range. The Nhoord Red V1 does have a little bit of ring in the mid-range. And so what the Geek Out did is emphasize these shortcomings. Whereas the Hugo 2 was more natural. The Hugo 2 had a blacker background, a more natural presentation without any exaggeration of the music, so therefore the strengths of the headphones did not become over-exaggerated and become, you know, more glaring or apparent flaws. Again, the LCD actually, when you pair it with the natural sound of the Hugo 2, it does shout, but it is not as grating, and it's not as hard, it is not as obvious and displeasing. I enjoyed it. Again, with the Nhoord Red V1, pairing it with the Hugo 2, the mid-range did not have as much of the apparent ring. It's because of the more natural sound from the Hugo versus the bit of emphasis coming from the Geek Out V2. Now I did use the balance connection with the Geek Out V2 in both headphones. The Hugo 2 also had better clarity in the lows. It dug a little bit deeper. It again, the Geek Out V2 exaggerated some texture in the lows, whereas the Hugo 2 was more resolved. It was not as exaggerated. It was not as simplified. The decay was quicker. It was smoother. It was more detailed. The Geek Out V2 also, with the LCD XE, lacked some soundstage. I was struggling to get a rear channel sometimes. The sense of, behind and forward was a little hazed with the Geek Out V2 versus the Nhoord Hugo 2. The Nhoord didn't have as much of an issue. Ultimately, is the Nhoord Hugo 2 worth 4 times more? The Geek Out V2 is $499. The Nhoord Hugo 2 is right around $2,000. That's a question you'll have to answer. What I did find is the Hugo 2 was around 20% better. The more natural sound did not exaggerate or overemphasize the flaws in both of these headphones. Next, guys, let's talk about how the Hugo 2 compared to my NFB10 ES2. Unfortunately, the NFB10 ES2 from AudioGD is way too big to put on the table. It's about the size of this mat, although more rectangular. The NFB10 ES2 is purely a desktop solution. It requires that it be plugged in all the time, and it is not transportable. Do not stick it in your backpack. Do not toss it in your car. It weighs a ton. It is not a transportable. The Hugo 2, however, much smaller, much more transportable, did a fairly impressive job substituting as the at-home solution for my system. Again, I did not use the Hugo 2 in desktop mode as it gets too hot. I did keep it charged and ran it exclusively in battery mode. That said, with the LCD XE, what the Hugo 2 did was it resolved more power in the decay, especially in the lows. The NFB ES2 placed some emphasis on the attack in the bass and lacked some of the power in the release of those low notes. That was impressive. The blacker Hugo 2 did a better job of resolving, the sheer weight and power of that planar bass presentation. Additionally, the Hugo 2 had a flatter, though more cohesive sound. The sound of the Hugo 2, was very well defined. It was a clearly defined space. It was very, circular placement was easy. In contrast, the NFB10 ES2, sometimes it would jump a little bit. It was not as cohesive, but it presented me with changes of height. So in a track where instruments may be moving up or down, it was more apparent. David Chesky's drum and bell circular test around the mic, it was obvious from the NFB that the drum was kind of shifting up and kind of down. It wasn't just a perfect circle. The Hugo 2 flattened the image and gave me a very perfect, very concise circle. But the NFB, while it jumped, the bass would skip sometimes. It was very up and then kind of down. It was more rhythmic. Not rhythmic, but there was a sense of movement. There was a sense of height on the NFB10 ES2 that is not present with the Hugo 2. Additionally, the Hugo 2 had the more natural sound. It was resolving a thicker, more grounded timbre. There was a from-the-body quality on the LCD XE that was needed, whereas the NFB10 ES2 was thinner, a little bit airier. It was lacking a sense of body, and its exaggerated nature was obvious. The LCD XE's shout, presented with the somewhat exaggerated, presentation of macro detail, did not mesh as well, in my opinion. Moving to the HE4, HE4 is a bit of a difficult comparison with the Hugo 2 because the NFB10 ES2 is my reference because it has the power needed to keep the HE4 energetic, to keep the HE4's resolve at the level that I expect from it. That said, the NFB10 ES2 offered more tactility, more dynamics. The sound was harder, textures were more defined, although they were marginally exaggerated. The HE4 is already super defined. The NFB10 ES2's exaggerated, harder textures really paired with the HE4 to make a super exciting, super dynamic, super over-defined sound that was often a bit unrealistic. That said, with the Hugo 2, there was a more intimate sound. There was a better, more realistic timbre, although the soundstage was a bit disjointed. The NFB10 ES2 was often more coherent. I think a lot of this has to do with the power. You know, the sense of jump that existed in the LCD XC with the NFB10 ES2, well, the situation was reversed. Using the balanced output of the NFB10 ES2 with both headphones, the HE4 proved to be more coherent. It had both the changes in height as well as the more circular sound, whereas the Hugo 2 would make that drum make some of the bass notes skip. I think a lot of this has to do with the lack of power on the Hugo 2 that was needed to fully resolve, you know, the low end for the HE4. Ultimately, though, it speaks well of the NFB10 ES2, and it puts some perspective to the Hugo 2. The Hugo 2 is $2,000. My NFB10 ES2 was fed with coax through a shit etier that cost me $200 after I paid tax and shipping. You know, the amp itself was about $750, so let's just round up to $1,000. Just to be on the safe side in case there's any incidentals. Twice the price, right? I doubled the price of my NFB10 ES2. I do not get double the performance with the Nhoord Hugo 2. It is different. There are improvements, but not the best value, I think, for a desktop solution. Guys, let's wrap things up by talking about how the Nhoord Hugo 2 compared to the NFB10 ES2 as the DAC for the ZMF Eikon, which I pair with my Project Ember 2. This combination is one that's going to be difficult to forget. I've talked about the exaggeration of a Sabre DAC, something that I've read about but that I didn't fully grasp or hear until recently. Listening to the Hugo 2 with the ZMF Eikon was the distinctive moment. It was the first time for me that I could hear, I understood what people meant when they spoke of the exaggeration of, you know, a Sabre, ESS Sabre DAC chip. The sense of fake detail. What I love about the Eikon is its knack for micro detail above macro detail. What I love about the Hugo 2 is its black background, its focus on the micro detail and not the macro detail. With these two together, it was very memorable. It was a very involved, very beautiful listening experience that was focused in on the music. The micro detail, the level of resolve was there. Ambient noise was taken a step back and was not as obvious or as focused. I appreciated that. There was better transients. There was vibrato in the decay of instruments that I hadn't noticed before. There was a timbre of from the body, you know, warmth that I hadn't noticed before. I've talked about these qualities of the Hugo with other headphones, but it wasn't until I listened to the Eikon with the Hugo was I able to hear those. Once you hear those, once you hear what that sounds like, once you hear, you know, a change in a speaker's or a singer's voice, just a small shift, you know, you get that sense of it's from their chest, you know, it's from, you know, their body. You know, it's indistinct. Once you notice it and you pick up on it, you can identify it in other systems. And the Eikon with the Project Ember 2 and the Hugo 2 was where I heard it first, where it became clear to me. So again, I really have to give it to the Hugo 2 for bringing just an excellent, resolved, very black, very focused on the music presentation that pairs beautifully with the ZMF Eikon. In comparison, the NFB10 ES2 is thinner, it's a bit exaggerated, it brings more focus onto the micro detail, which is noisy, really, it's noisy, you know. There's better dynamics with the NFB10 ES2, but those overemphasis dynamics, along with, you know, the exaggeration and the macro detail, are a bit distracting. It's going to take me a couple of days to try and forget the blacker, more focused, more, you know, music-oriented sound of the Hugo 2. Right? So, in conclusion, guys, the Hugo 2 is a great transportable product. It is a great product that you can take anywhere that you go. You can hook up to a variety of sources. You can pair it with an amplifier with a variety of headphones. It is an excellent transportable. It's $2,000. I hook it up to my cell phone. I can hook it up to my laptop. I can drop it at home in my desktop battery operated. It works phenomenally well for that. The sound is focused on the music with excellent micro resolve, excellent micro detail. It does not put as much of the emphasis and exaggeration onto the sound as what I'm used to. What the Hugo 2 does not do well, it is not a desktop solution. If your only intent is to leave it plugged in at home, hooked up to an amplifier, it is not for you. The Hugo 2's strength is its flexibility, is its transportability, it does a lot. You can drop it into a system, into different systems, and it does well. A dedicated at-home solution is not an environment that the Hugo 2 fits in. The Hugo 2 runs too hot to be at home 24/7. Again, great sound, great black background. The internal headphone amp is wonderful. The line-out quality is wonderful. The build quality is sufficient. The remote, helps keep the usability, helps keep the wear and tear down. The Hugo 2 is a transportable. Pack it in your car, stick it in your book bag, take it along with your favorite headphones and a laptop or with your cell phone, whatever you've got, and it's going to give you an amazing quality of music on the go. I again would recommend the Hugo 2 for somebody who wants that portable, transportable solution. I want to thank Cord for giving me the chance to listen to the Hugo 2. It's been an eye-opener, as well as the member of HeadFi who helped organize the tour. As always, guys, remember to like and subscribe, and check out some upcoming reviews for more equipment that's old, equipment that's new, equipment that's gold, and just stuff that I think you'll enjoy hearing about and that I enjoyed listening to.